The stars above New Haven burned cold and distant as the fleet drifted through the outer system like ghosts made of metal and hate. 3 massive ships, each one bigger than the human colony's largest building, moved with deadly silence toward the small world that humans called home. Commander stood on the bridge of the lead vessel, his 8-foot frame casting long shadows across the metal floor. His razor-sharp claws tapped against the command console as he watched the blue and green planet grow larger on the screen. The thick scales that covered his body gleamed under the ship's lights, and his yellow eyes studied the human settlements below with cold interest. "Another weak species," he said to his second-in-command, K. "Look how they spread across their world like insects. No defenses worth speaking of. No weapons that could threaten us." K nodded his massive head. "The pattern is always the same, Commander. They build, they breed, they think they are safe. Then we arrive." For over 2,000 years, they had been the galaxy's most feared predators. They moved from system to system, world to world, hunting species that seemed weak or unworthy. Their method was always the same and always effective. Find the young ones, take them, break the spirit of the adults, watch entire civilizations crumble. They had destroyed the crystal singers of. They had enslaved the tree dwellers of the forgotten sector. Hundreds of species had fallen before their claws, and the survivors served them with broken hearts and empty eyes. Now they had found humans. Pulled up the intelligence reports on his screen. The data showed a species that had spread to only 12 worlds in 300 years. Slow expansion. Limited military. Most of their technology focused on building and growing things, not fighting. They seemed to prefer talking to fighting, which they saw as weakness. "They call themselves peaceful," said with a sound that might have been laughter in another species. "They have councils and votes and meetings. They think words can stop claws and teeth." The reports showed human settlements full of families. Adults who worked together, building cities and farms. Children who played and learned in groups, protected by their communities but not hidden away. They had watched these settlements for weeks, learning patterns and routines. It was almost too easy. "Have you chosen the target?" Kay asked. Touched his screen and an image appeared. A small human child with dark hair and bright eyes, no more than 7 of their years old. The file showed her name, Maya, parents, and Li Wei, both terraforming engineers. Home, Sector 7 of New Haven Colony. "This one," said, "she represents everything they value. Young, innocent, protected by their community. When we take her, they will understand that nothing they care about is safe from us." The child played often in the central plaza with other young humans. She attended a learning facility where dozens of children gathered each day. Her parents worked in the tower that controlled the colony's environmental systems, a perfect target in every way. "The extraction will be simple," Kay said, studying the colony's layout. "The humans have no real security, no weapons beyond small personal defense tools, no training for this kind of threat." His claws extended slightly as he planned the attack. They had perfected this operation over centuries. Strike fast, take the chosen target, broadcast the capture to the entire species, demand submission, watch the spirit break. 3 days from now, he decided. The child's learning group has planned a journey to the crystal formations outside the main settlement. They will be away from the majority of the adult population, in an area with limited communication systems, perfect for our needs. The bridge crew began their preparations. Weapons were checked and charged. The neural disruptor technology that would paralyze human adults was tested and calibrated. Transport ships were for quick strikes and faster retreats. As they worked, reviewed files on the other species they had conquered. The pattern was always the same. Strong species that fought hard in the beginning always fell the fastest once their young were threatened. The knowledge that their children could be taken at any time broke something deep inside most intelligent species. Humans would be no different. "Commander," his communication officer reported. "We have completed our scan of their military capabilities. 2 small patrol vessels in the outer system, 1 defensive station around their main colony world, limited energy weapons, no ships designed for extended combat." "As expected," replied. "They have spread themselves thin across multiple worlds with no real defenses. When we take the child, they will have nothing to threaten us with except words and pleading." The fleet settled into position at the edge of the system, hidden behind the gravity shadow of a dead moon. From here, they could strike at New Haven within hours while remaining invisible to human sensors. Looked at Maya's image one more time. In 3 days, this small human child would become the key to her species' surrender. That would add another broken civilization to their collection, and the humans would learn what every other species had learned before them. The galaxy belonged to the strong, and the strong took what they wanted from the weak. But as the commander made his final preparations, he failed to understand one critical thing about the species he was about to target. Humans were not like the other races that had conquered. They had spread slowly through space not because they were weak, but because they had learned to be careful. And they protected their children with a fierce intensity that no alien species had ever truly understood. In 3 days would learn the difference between seeming weak and being weak. But by then, it would be far too late for him and his kind to change course. The hunt was about to begin, but they had chosen the wrong prey. The morning sun cast long shadows through the crystal formations as Maya and her classmates explored the ancient caves outside New Haven Colony. The crystals caught the light and threw rainbows across the cave walls, making the children gasp and point with excitement. "Stay close to the group," called Mrs., their teacher, as she counted heads for the 3rd time that morning. 22 children, 4 adult supervisors, and enough emergency supplies to handle any normal problem that might come up during their field trip. Maya pressed her small hands against a purple crystal that hummed with a low, musical note when touched. Her friend Jake stood next to her, trying to make the crystal sing a different tune by touching it in different spots. "I think they're alive," Maya whispered, her dark eyes wide with wonder. "Listen to how they talk to each other." The children had been looking forward to this trip for weeks. The Crystal Caves were one of New Haven's most beautiful natural features, and field trips here were special treats that happened only twice each year. None of them noticed the shadows that moved wrong among the rock formations outside. Mrs. checked her communication device and frowned slightly. The signal was weaker here than she had expected, but still strong enough for emergency contact with the colony. The weather reports showed clear skies all day, and the children were having a wonderful time. Everything seemed perfect. Commander crouched behind a boulder 300 meters from the cave entrance, his scales shifting color to match the gray stone around him. His assault team was in position. 12 warriors, each one trained for exactly this kind of operation. "Neural disruptors ready," Kay reported through their communication system. "Target confirmed in the cave with the other young ones and 4 adult guardians." "Begin," ordered. The attack happened in seconds. Strange silver devices sailed through the air and landed near the cave entrance, releasing clouds of shimmering gas. The adult humans stumbled and fell within moments, their nervous systems overwhelmed by technology designed specifically for their biology. The children screamed and ran deeper into the caves, but there was nowhere to go. Warriors moved with deadly speed, their clawed feet silent on the stone floor. They ignored the other children completely, focused only on their chosen target. Maya found herself cornered in a small side chamber, her back against a wall of singing crystals. A massive shape filled the entrance, blocking out the light. She looked up at Commander, her young mind struggling to understand what she was seeing. "Please," she whispered, tears running down her face. "I want to go home." reached down with one clawed hand and lifted the child easily. She weighed almost nothing to his massive frame. Her terrified crying echoed off the cave walls as he carried her toward his transport ship. "The target is secured," he reported to his fleet. "Begin the broadcast." Within minutes, every human communication device in the colony received the same message. The image of Maya appeared on screens across New Haven, showing her trapped in a metal cage aboard an alien ship. Commander's terrifying form dominated the message as he spoke in perfectly clear human language. "People of Earth and her colonies," his voice boomed through speakers in homes, offices, and public squares. "Your child belongs to the now. You have 72 hours to surrender your governments, your military forces, and your colonies to our control. If you refuse, the child dies, and we will take more of your young until you understand your place in this galaxy." The message ended, with coordinates showing the fleet's position in the outer system. In the colony's emergency command center, Governor Sarah stared at the screen in shock. Around her, communications officers and security personnel struggled to process what they had just seen. "How many ships?" she asked, her voice steady despite the horror in her eyes. "3 large vessels, Governor," Lieutenant Hayes reported. "Each one bigger than anything in our defensive fleet. Unknown weapons capability, but they got through our sensors without any warning." Activated her emergency protocols, sending immediate messages to Earth Command and every human colony in the sector. The responses came back quickly. Military vessels were already moving toward New Haven, but the closest ones were still days away. Too far to help Maya. In Sector 7 of the colony, and Lee received the terrible news while they were working in the Environmental Control Center. Dropped his tools and ran for the communication panel, his hands shaking as he tried to call his daughter's school. "Maya," Lee whispered, staring at her child's terrified face on the emergency broadcast. "Our little girl." They had made one critical mistake in their planning. They assumed that human parents would react like the parents of every other species they had conquered. They expected fear, despair, and eventually acceptance of their child's fate. They had never encountered was a terraforming engineer, trained to reshape entire worlds for human habitation. He understood geology, atmospheric systems, and the kind of technology needed to move mountains. Lee was a biologist who studied how life adapted to impossible conditions. Together, they began planning something that no other species had ever attempted when their children were taken by the. They began planning to get their daughter back. "The colony's emergency council is meeting in 10 minutes, Governor announced over the communication system. "All department heads, all security personnel, all off-duty military staff. We need options." But even as the humans gathered to discuss their response, something else was happening across their space. Word of Maya's capture spread through human communication networks faster than any official message could travel. On Earth, Admiral Torres received the emergency signal and felt something cold settle in her chest. She had children of her own, who played and laughed and trusted the adults in their world to keep them safe. "Communications," she ordered. "Send messages to every human vessel in the sector, every ship, every station, every crew. All leave is canceled. All non-essential missions are suspended." "Admiral," her aide asked carefully, "should we wait for orders from command?" Torres looked at Maya's picture on her screen. 7 years old, dark hair, eyes full of terror. "No," she said quietly. "Some things are more important than waiting for orders." Across human space, the same scene played out dozens of times. Ship captains changed course without authorization. Military units abandoned their posts and headed toward New Haven. Even civilian vessels began moving, carrying whatever weapons and supplies their crews could gather. The thought they had sent a message of fear to humanity. Instead, they had done something that no alien species had ever managed to do before. They had united every human in the galaxy behind a single purpose. In his command chamber aboard the lead ship, watched the human colony's communication traffic with satisfaction. Panic messages, emergency meetings, desperate calls for help from distant military forces. All exactly as he had expected. The humans are responding according to pattern, he reported to the home fleet. Fear and desperation. They will surrender within the required time. But if had been monitoring human communications more carefully, he might have noticed something unusual. The panic messages were being replaced by something else. Coordination, planning, and a cold, focused anger that was spreading through human space like wildfire. Maya sat in her metal cage, scared and alone, thousands of kilometers from her home. She did not know that her capture had just signed the death warrant of an entire predator species. The taking was complete. Now came humanity's response. Doctor stood in the emergency session hall of the Galactic Council on Theta Prime, watching the representatives of 47 species argue about the situation developing in human space. As the galaxy's leading expert on human behavior, she had been called to provide analysis of what the attack might mean for interstellar stability. What she was seeing in the data streams from human space terrified her more than they ever had. The human response is unprecedented, she told the assembled delegates, her voice cutting through their debates. In all my years studying their species, I have never seen anything like this. Ambassador of the Federation, a tall being with blue-scaled skin and 4 arms, gestured dismissively. One child taken by Their reaction is emotional but predictable. They will negotiate, pay the ransom, and submit like every other species has done. No, said firmly, pulling up real-time data on the chamber's main screen. Look at these movement patterns. This isn't negotiation preparation. This is mobilization. The display showed the positions of human vessels across 3 sectors. Military ships, cargo haulers, passenger liners, even small personal craft, all of them changing course and converging toward New Haven colony. Impossible, croaked delegate from his environmental tank. No species responds to individual threats with full military mobilization. The cost would be enormous. His hands moved across her data pad, bringing up more information. 17 human naval vessels have abandoned their assigned patrol routes. 4 entire have left their home systems without authorization. The human merchant fleet has stopped all scheduled deliveries and redirected toward the New Haven sector. The numbers continued to climb as she spoke. Private security forces from 12 human colonies have pooled their resources. 3 mining corporations have armed their industrial ships and joined the movement. Even their criminal organizations are participating. Criminal organizations. Ambassador's voice carried disbelief. The Red Comet pirates sent a message to Human Command offering their services for the duration of the emergency, read from her reports. Free of charge. A murmur of confusion ran through the chamber. In the galaxy's recorded history, no species had ever shown this kind of unified response to a single individual being threatened. You must understand, continued, humans have a biological and cultural imperative that we have never fully appreciated. They do not see children as simply the next generation. They see them as sacred trusts. When you threaten a human child, you threaten something that activates responses in their brains that go deeper than logic or self-preservation. On New Haven itself, Governor stood in the colony's command center watching the same data streams with a mixture of hope and fear. The human response was beyond anything she had expected, but it might also be too late to save Maya. Governor, Lieutenant Hayes reported, we're receiving direct communications from approaching vessels. The UES Determination will arrive in 18 hours. The UES Thunder and the UES Resilience are 6 hours behind them. What about civilian ships? Ma'am, we have over 200 vessels inbound. Cargo ships, passenger liners, private yachts. Half of them are carrying improvised weapons systems. Nodded grimly. The approaching fleet was impressive, but the ships were still larger and more advanced than anything humanity had ever built for war. Meanwhile, in Sector 7 of the colony, and Lee were not waiting for the fleet to arrive. Stood in his workshop, surrounded by equipment designed for reshaping planetary surfaces, seismic charges that could move mountains, drilling systems that could cut through solid rock, atmospheric processors that could change the chemical composition of entire continents. The tracking data shows they're keeping Maya on the third moon of the gas giant, Lee said, studying the scanner readings they had stolen from the colony's defense center. The moon has a thin atmosphere, mostly nitrogen and carbon dioxide. Nodded, his engineer's mind already working on the problem. They chose it because it's isolated and difficult to approach. They think the environment will work in their favor. They don't know what terraforming equipment can do, Lee replied. Together, they began loading his industrial crawler with every piece of heavy equipment they could carry. Seismic charges that could crack a moon's crust, atmospheric converters that could turn poisonous air into something humans could breathe, mining drones that could tunnel through solid stone. "We can't wait for the military," said as he checked the crawler's life support systems. "Maya doesn't have that long." Lee activated the vehicle's communication systems and sent a coded message to 3 other families in their sector. Families whose own children attended school with Maya. Families who understood exactly what and Lee were planning to do. Within hours, 4 industrial crawlers loaded with terraforming equipment were moving across New Haven's surface toward the hidden launch facility that had discovered in the colony's records. An old emergency site with a single-use rocket capable of reaching the system's outer worlds. They were not soldiers, they were not warriors, they were parents and their child was in danger. Back aboard the flagship, Commander watched the human fleet movements with growing confusion. The response was larger than anything in their strategic databases. "Commander," Kay reported, "human vessels are continuing to arrive in the outer system. Current count is over 300 ships." 300, claws extended unconsciously, for one child. "Our intelligence may have been incomplete," Kay suggested carefully. Studied the tactical display. The human ships were not approaching in standard military formations. Instead, they seemed to be organizing themselves into something he had never seen before, a formation that put protecting the child above tactical advantage. "It does not matter," he decided. "Our ships are superior to anything they possess. When they arrive, we will destroy enough of them to break their spirit, then proceed with the child's execution as planned." But even as he spoke, felt something he had never experienced in 2 centuries of successful conquests: uncertainty. On Earth, Admiral Torres stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant as it accelerated toward New Haven at maximum speed. Around her ship, the largest human fleet in history was taking shape. "Admiral," her communications officer reported, "we're receiving messages from the approaching civilian vessels. They're requesting tactical assignments." Torres looked at the display showing cargo ships with hastily mounted weapons, passenger liners carrying volunteer fighters, even a luxury yacht whose owner had somehow acquired military-grade shields. "Assign them support roles," she ordered. "But tell them this: if any civilian vessel engages the enemy directly without orders, I will personally court-martial every person aboard." "Yes, Admiral, but they're asking what happens if they see an opportunity to rescue the child." Torres was quiet for a long moment. She thought of her own, safe on Earth but vulnerable to the same kind of threat that had taken Maya. "Tell them," she said finally, "that protecting that little girl is the only priority that matters. Everything else is secondary." As the human fleet continued to grow, Doctor completed her analysis for the Galactic Council. Her final report contained a single, chilling conclusion. They have made a fundamental error, she told the assembled delegates. They have treated this as a standard conquest operation against a species they perceive as weak. But humans are not weak. They are careful. They have been holding back their true capabilities because they prefer peace to war. And now, Ambassador asked. Now they are not holding back, replied. They wanted to send a message about power. Instead, they have awakened something that I believe will end their species entirely. The chamber fell silent as the implications of her words sank in. You're suggesting humans are capable of genocide? Delegate asked. No, said quietly. I'm suggesting that when it comes to protecting their children, humans are capable of anything. In the cold space around New Haven's third moon, Maya sat in her metal cage and tried to be brave. She did not know that hundreds of ships were coming to save her, or that her parents were crossing space in a modified industrial vehicle, loaded with enough firepower to reshape worlds. She only knew that she was scared, and she wanted to go home. But across human space, something unprecedented was happening. A species that had always valued peace above war, diplomacy above violence, was showing the galaxy what they became when their children were threatened. The awakening had begun, and they were about to learn the difference between predators and apex predators. The human fleet arrived at New Haven's outer system 31 hours after Maya's capture. Admiral Torres stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant, looking at a tactical display that showed the largest gathering of human ships in the species' history. 473 vessels, military battleships alongside cargo haulers with improvised weapons, luxury liners carrying volunteer fighters next to mining ships bristling with industrial cutting tools. Even 3 vessels flying the Red Comet pirate flag, their weapons powered down but ready. Admiral, her tactical officer reported, the ships have taken position around the third moon of the gas giant. They're using the moon's gravity well as a defensive barrier. Torres studied the enemy formation. 3 massive alien vessels, each one designed to intimidate and destroy. For 2,000 years, these ships had been death sentences for any species that opposed them. Communications, she ordered. Open a channel to all ships, human vessels in. The channel activated, carrying her voice to every ship in the system. This is Admiral Torres of the United Earth Fleet. Vessels, you have taken a human child. You will return her immediately and withdraw from this system. Commander's response came within seconds, his alien voice filled with contempt. Human Commander, you are outmatched. Your ships are inferior, your weapons primitive. Withdraw now, or we will destroy your fleet and execute the child in full view of your worlds. Torres looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew. Men and women who had traveled farther and faster than any human ships had ever gone before, all to save one 7-year-old girl they had never met. Commander, she replied, you have made one critical error in your calculations. And what is that, human? You assumed we came here to negotiate. The battle began not with the human fleet's advance, but with something they had never seen before. Industrial mining vessels moved forward and began firing, not at the enemy ships, but at the moon's surface. Massive drilling platforms, designed to carve through asteroid cores, opened fire on the rocky surface below the position. Seismic charges, normally used to crack open mineral deposits, detonated in carefully calculated patterns. What are they doing? Kay asked as his ship's sensors recorded the strange human behavior. Watched the tactical display with growing alarm. The humans were not attacking his ships. They were attacking the moon itself. Impossible, he said. They cannot be planning to. His words were cut off as the first seismic shock wave hit his ship. The carefully chosen defensive position around the moon had become a trap. The humans were literally pulling the ground out from under the fleet. Commander, his engineering officer reported, The moon's gravity field is becoming unstable if we remain in this position. Move to open space, ordered. All ships emergency acceleration. But the human fleet was ready for this. As the vessels struggled to escape the collapsing gravity well, 400 human ships opened fire. The weapons were not all military grade. Some were improvised cutting tools from mining operations. Others were modified cargo handling systems, but all of them fired together, creating a wall of destructive energy that caught the first ship as it cleared the moon's atmosphere. The alien vessel's shields held for exactly 4 seconds before failing under the coordinated assault. The ship broke apart in a shower of metal and flame, taking 200 warriors with it. "Impossible!" screamed as his remaining ships tried to return fire. "No species has ever coordinated an attack of this magnitude." Admiral Torres watched the battle display with cold satisfaction. The human ships moved with a precision that seemed impossible for such a large fleet, but they were not following standard military doctrine. They were following something deeper and more powerful than any tactical manual. They were following the absolute imperative to protect a child. "Second ship is breaking apart," her weapons officer reported. "Third vessel is attempting to retreat toward the system's edge." "Do not let it escape," Torres ordered. "No one who threatens human children leaves this system alive." The human fleet moved like a single organism, cutting off every escape route while continuing their relentless assault on the moon's surface. Where they had hoped to find safety, they found only destruction. But while the fleet battle raged in space, another operation was taking place on the moon's surface. Lee's industrial crawler had landed on the dark side of the moon 6 hours before the fleet arrived. Using equipment designed for planetary terraforming, they had tunneled through solid rock toward the facility where their daughter was being held. "Atmospheric readings show the complex is 300 meters below the surface," Lee reported, checking her scanner displays. "They chose this location because they thought it was impregnable." Activated the heavy drilling system and smiled grimly. They never fought terraforming engineers before. The drilling platform carved through stone and metal with equal ease, following a path that would bring them directly into the heart of the complex. Behind them, 3 other industrial crawlers followed, carrying enough mining explosives to reshape continents. In the facility, Maya sat in her metal cage as alien warriors ran past her in panic. She could hear explosions and feel the ground shaking beneath her feet. "Mama," she whispered, hopping somehow that her parents might hear her. "Papa." The explosions were getting closer. Above the moon, the last ship fought desperately against impossible odds. Commander watched his tactical display as human ships surrounded him from every direction. His weapons could destroy any individual human vessel, but there were too many of them, and they kept coming. "Commander," Kay reported, "the humans are broadcasting a message on all frequencies." "What do they say?" "Just coordinates, sir. The exact location of our facility on the moon's surface." His blood ran cold as he understood what the coordinates meant. The human fleet was not trying to capture the facility intact. They were going to destroy the entire moon to get their child back. "Recall all ground forces," he ordered. "Prepare for immediate evacuation." But it was too late. His drilling platform broke through the facility's outer wall at the exact moment that the human fleet's bombardment reached its peak. The complex shook and twisted as explosions tore through its structure. Lee ran through corridors filled with panicking warriors, their industrial suits protecting them from the alien weapons. They followed Lee's scanner readings toward the holding cells where their daughter waited. "Maya," Lee's voice echoed through the metal corridors. "Maya, we're here." A small voice answered from somewhere ahead of them. "Mama, Papa." They found her in a metal cage in a room filled with control systems. Used his suits cutting tools to slice through the alien metal, while Lee checked their daughter for injuries. "Are you hurt, little star?" Lee asked, using Maya's favorite nickname. "I'm scared," Maya replied, throwing her arms around her mother's neck. "But I knew you would come." Lifted both of them in his powerful arms. Time to go home. They ran back through the collapsing facility as the human fleet's bombardment continued above them. The complex was tearing itself apart under the combined assault from space and from the tunnels below. In space, Commander made his final desperate transmission. "Human fleet," he broadcast on all frequencies. "We surrender, the child is yours, we yield to your superior force." Admiral Torres received the message on her flagship, but she did not respond. Around her, the human fleet continued its relentless attack on the last ship. "Admiral," her communications officer said carefully, "they're requesting terms of surrender." Torres looked at the image of Maya on her screen. 7 years old, taken from a school field trip, terrorized by monsters who had done this same thing to countless other children across the galaxy. "There are no terms," she said quietly. "Fire all weapons." The last ship died in a ball of fire and plasma, taking the final remnants of the attack force with it. On the moon's surface, and Lee's industrial crawler broke through into open space just as the human fleet finished its work. Behind them, the facility collapsed completely, burying 2,000 years of predatory technology under millions of tons of rock. Maya sat between her parents as their small ship headed home, watching the stars through the viewport. "Did the bad aliens hurt anyone else?" she asked. Lee looked at, both of them thinking of the 400 human ships that had traveled across space to save their daughter. "No, little star," Lee said. "They didn't hurt anyone else, and they never will again." Above them, the human fleet began forming up for the journey home. The battle had lasted exactly 31 hours from the time the first human ship arrived until the last vessel was destroyed. Admiral Torres stood on her bridge, looking at a system that was now completely free of the predators that had terrorized the galaxy for. "Send a message to Earth Command," she ordered. "Mission accomplished. The child is safe. All forces in this system have been eliminated." The reckoning was complete. But across the galaxy, other fleets had received the battle reports. They had watched their seemingly invincible warriors destroyed by a species they had dismissed as weak and peaceful. And for the first time in their history, they were afraid. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been running for 6 straight days. Representatives from 47 species sat in the Great Chamber on Theta Prime, trying to process what they had witnessed in the New Haven system. Ambassador Sarah Torres, Admiral Torres' sister and humanity's chief diplomat, stood at the center of the chamber as species after species demanded explanations for what they called the human response. 473 ships, Ambassador of the Federation said, his 4 arms gesturing wildly. "You mobilized 473 ships for one individual. The economic cost alone should have bankrupted your outer colonies." Sarah Torres looked around the chamber with calm eyes. "The cost was irrelevant." "Irrelevant," Delegate's voice bubbled from his environmental tank. "The military resources you deployed could have defended 3 star systems. And we would have deployed 10 times that number if necessary," Sarah replied. "When our children are threatened, there is no such thing as excessive force." A murmur of confusion ran through the chamber. Doctor, who had been monitoring human communication during the crisis, pulled up her final analysis on the chamber's display screens. "Members of the Council," said, "I want you to understand what we observed during the 31 hours of the New Haven operation. This was not a military response. This was something much more fundamental." The screens showed data streams from across human space during the crisis. Within 4 hours of Maya's capture, spontaneous demonstrations occurred on every human world. Factory workers stopped production lines. Office workers left their jobs. Students walked out of schools. More data appeared. Human spacecraft changed course from over 400 different systems, not just military vessels but civilian ships, cargo haulers, even private luxury yachts. They abandoned scheduled deliveries, broke commercial contracts, and risked bankruptcy to participate in the rescue operation. "This makes no sense," Ambassador protested. "No rational species sacrifices economic stability for one individual." "You're missing the point," replied. "To humans, Maya was not just one individual. She represented every human child who ever might be threatened. The response was biological and cultural, not rational." Sarah Torres stepped forward. "Doctor is correct. When they took Maya, they declared war on every human parent, grandparent, and child in the galaxy. The response was inevitable." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. For thousands of years, the galaxy's predator species had operated on a simple principle: target the young to break the spirit of the strong. It had worked on every species they had encountered. Until now. "The fleet at New Haven has been completely destroyed," Sarah continued. 3 ships, over 3,000 warriors, and 2,000 years of technological advancement, eliminated in 31 hours. She activated a new display showing the current status of forces across the galaxy. But that's not the end of this story. It's the beginning. On the display, red indicators showed fleet positions across 12 sectors. As the delegates watched, white indicators began appearing around each red marker. "Human vessels?" Delegate asked. "Human vessels," Sarah confirmed. "We tracked every ship in the galaxy, every fleet, every outpost, every hidden base they thought we didn't know about." Ambassador's blue scales shifted to a paler color. "You're planning to attack them all." "We don't plan to attack anyone," Sarah replied. "We've already done it." The display updated in real time, showing battle reports from across the galaxy. Fleets that had terrorized star systems for centuries were being destroyed one by human forces that seemed to appear from nowhere. "Impossible," whispered. "Humans don't have the military infrastructure for an operation of this scale." "You're right," Sarah said. "We don't have military infrastructure for galactic war, but we do have industrial infrastructure for galactic construction, mining equipment that can crack asteroids, terraforming systems that can reshape planets, manufacturing platforms that can build anything we need." The truth was both simple and terrifying. Humanity had spent 3 centuries spreading across space not as conquerors, but as builders. Their ships were designed for long-distance travel, their equipment for transforming hostile environments. When they needed weapons, they simply converted their tools. "They made one fatal assumption," Sarah continued. "They thought that because we prefer peace, we are incapable of war, but we're not pacifists by weakness. We're pacifists by choice." Doctor pulled up the final piece of data that had stunned the entire galaxy. The total human response time from Maya's capture to the complete elimination of all forces in the galaxy was 78 hours and 43 minutes. The chamber erupted in shocked voices. 78 hours to hunt down and destroy a species that had dominated the galaxy for. "Furthermore," continued, "preliminary reports suggest that human forces recovered approximately 40,000 children of various species from holding facilities across the galaxy. Species we didn't even know were being targeted." Ambassador stared at the data. "You rescued children from species that aren't even allied with humanity." "When we found children in cages," Sarah replied, "we didn't stop to check their species designation." The chamber fell silent again as this revelation sank in. The humans had not just rescued their own child. They had liberated every child they had taken. "There's something else you need to know," Sarah said, her voice carrying a new weight. 26 hours ago, we received a formal communication from the surviving leadership." A new display activated, showing the text of an alien message that had been transmitted on all galactic communication frequencies. The Dominion formally surrenders all territory, all military assets, and all political authority to the human coalition. We request only that our surviving population be allowed to exist under human protection. We renounce all claims to superiority over other species and accept permanent subjugation to human authority. We beg for mercy. The message was signed by every surviving commander in the galaxy. They're afraid, Sarah explained. For 2,000 years they believed they were the apex predators. Now they know the truth. Delegates' environmental tank bubbled nervously, and humanity's response to this surrender. Sarah Torres smiled, but it was not a warm expression. We've accepted their surrender and granted their request for protection. Survivors are being relocated to reservation worlds where they can live peacefully under human supervision. And the rest of the galaxy? Ambassador asked carefully. The rest of the galaxy continues as before, Sarah replied. Humans have no interest in conquest or domination. We want to build, explore, and learn. We want our children to play safely and our families to thrive in peace. She paused, looking around the chamber at the representatives of species that had never fully understood what humanity was capable of. But the galaxy should understand this, she continued. What happened today was not a military operation. It was not a war. It was simply what humans do when someone threatens our children. Doctor added her final analysis. Based on my observations, I believe humanity has permanently altered the balance of power in this galaxy, not through conquest, but through demonstration. Every species now knows what happens to those who target human children. And what about other threats? Delegate asked. Other predator species who might see opportunity in this fall. Sarah Torres' smile became genuinely warm for the first time during the session. We've received communications from 17 other predator species offering formal treaties of non-aggression. They're very interested in avoiding this fate. She activated one final display, showing a simple message that had been broadcast on every communication frequency in the galaxy. To all species who might consider threatening human children, we are builders by choice, not weakness. We are peaceful by preference, not inability. Touch our children and you will learn the difference between civilization and survival instinct. This is not a threat. This is simply information. The message was signed by every human government in the galaxy. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy settled into a new understanding. Humanity continued their peaceful expansion and their building projects. Trade routes reopened. Scientific collaboration resumed. Life went on much as it had before. But in the deepest parts of space, where predator species had once hunted with impunity, things were different now. Children of every species played safely under the protection of an unspoken guarantee. Because somewhere among the stars, 473 human ships had proven that some things in the universe were more sacred than profit, territory, or even survival itself. And every species that might threaten those sacred things had received a very clear message about the consequences. On New Haven Colony, Maya went back to her normal life. She attended school, played with her friends, and explored crystal caves under careful supervision. Sometimes she had nightmares about metal cages and alien voices, but they grew less frequent as time passed. Her parents and Lee returned to their terraforming work, but they kept certain pieces of equipment in their garage, just in case it was ever needed again. And across human space, mothers and fathers tucked their children into bed each night, with the quiet confidence that comes from knowing their species would move worlds to keep those children safe. The galaxy had learned a new truth: never threaten a human child. Because humanity's response would be swift, total, and absolutely without mercy. The message was received and understood.